I've never had it do that. I'm not sure what that issue is about.
Good evening, all. I'm Dustin, also known as Rope Aficionado, and this is the Dominance Dialogue. Tonight's episode, we're discussing executive authority transfer with Kevin and Katie. Unfortunately, you can't see them, and they got all dressed up just for me or us, but I'll take credit at least because I invited them, right? But we can't see them. We've had a lot of trouble with video. Nonetheless, we have solid audio, and that's really what matters. Kevin and Katie, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
It's good to
Would
be
you
here.
mind taking the time to introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience.
Sure. We've been together 21 years and a little, and we met online in the days of MSN chat. Met online, and I lured her to the States, and then she lured me back to Canada. So we've spent about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years in each country at this point.
Right from the start, we were in a leader-follower dynamic right from day one, even though we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, we started that right from the get-go, and we had a whole lot of different names for it and a lot of different ways we enacted it, and so we consider it a process of evolution.
Not yet, but thank you for divulging that. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and then just come right out the gates. There was something that when we were talking and discussing titles that came out to me, and I speculated, and I should have formulated a question about it, and I apologize ahead for not, but I didn't really know how to, so I'm just going to do it off the cuff. When we were discussing titles, you said that Katie does not identify as a submissive, so that in the title was an absolutely a no. But then just a moment ago, you identified that you, Kevin, are the leader in this relationship. So for some of us, that may be a little bit confusing because a lot of times we hear dominant, submissive, and you guys use terms like leader and follower. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit? Sweet. One second. Hold on a second. Now it's saying we have no audio.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Wait, nope. It's not you. It's me. It actually is this time. There we go. Yep, exactly. Thank you. One of the audience pointed out, I put a picture of you guys up, and when I did that, I accidentally muted the audio. Now they should be able to hear you. So.
Did they miss the entire question?
No, they heard me, but when I put your picture up in place of your video, I accidentally got too click happy apparently.
So back to
But
the start.
now they can hear you. I apologize.
Okay, okay.
Well, there might be an overlap here, but
There could be an overlap, sure.
Just start at the beginning.
So we started as Dom Sub way back in the 20 years ago days. we eventually decided that we were actually such a pervasive relationship in terms of both scope and domain and time, that sort of thing. It was a fully pervasive relationship. So we thought, geez, maybe master slave is actually what we actually are. Although we had no contact with the leather community. So we weren't master slave in the traditional kind of leather sense. We were just a very pervasive hierarchical relationship. Over time, we ended up kind of evolving that and saying that we're in a leader-follower relationship, and that I'm the leader, she's the follower. And there's a whole lot of reasons behind kind of some of the language choices we make, like saying authority transfer rather than power exchange, like our evolution away from master slave and to leader follower. So we could go into a whole ton of depth about that. But directly related to your question, dominance and submission is kind of on a whole different axis from roles. So you can have a dominant follower or a submissive follower. That's why the term like power sub or power slave or alpha sub or whatever is in existence, because people are trying to make sense of the fact that they are powerful, dominant personalities with a huge skill set, and yet they follow. And so they've cobbled together power submissive as a way to try to make sense of that. What we say is she is a follower, and she is an extraordinarily powerful follower. She has barely a submissive bone in her body.
Sometimes.
Unless we invite someone in. No.
That's right.
Sorry.
I've let a submissive bone in my body, but not yours.
So you had something else to say, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that when Kevin says we evolved through those different labels, we weren't changing who we were or our actual roles. It was just that it was a misfit for us. The words were a misfit. So the evolution was more understanding and being more clear about what we personally could identify as.
Yeah, nor were we evolving in a way to say, oh, well, master slave is better than dom sub and leader follower is better than master slave. It wasn't an evolution in terms of we have now reached the pinnacle and those are lesser life forms or something. Much more that we evolved our language and our understanding of who we were and what we were aimed at.
I think there's a lot of power to words, and there's at least a handful of people inside of the community that I don't know anything other than to be blunt. Surface level, their relationship inherently didn't necessarily make sense to me, and probably one of the examples that I can think of is I know at least two individuals off the top of my head that are both subservient and dominant in different dynamics. They're subservient in one dynamic and dominant in another dynamic, and at first it was hard to digest to some level, but for me there's a difference between submission and subservience, right? And I speculate that you resonate more with the latter inside of your guys' relationship. Would that be a correct assumption?
I don't know that we ever use subservient in any of our language. She is a powerful, devoted follower. And so, and that's part of the reason we end up with the executive model, kind of.
That's a good time to tie that in.
We treat our relationship using a model as if I am the CEO of a powerful corporation. And when I go hunting for someone to be a second in command in that organization, I don't go looking for someone with low skills. I don't go looking for someone that I can't trust to run the business. I don't go looking for someone that holds different values or priorities than me. So I looked for, as the CEO, a really powerful, competent, enhancing second command for my business. And the business is our relationship. And so I want someone who can predict outcomes for me. I want someone who can troubleshoot my decisions. I want someone who can bring me viable options. I want somebody who's really amazing, not necessarily just someone who's willing to follow.
I think that makes a lot of sense in many aspects.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
used to be early days. People would often, as we went out into the BDSM events and stuff, people would often say, "Well, she's not very submissive, is she? Not much of a submissive, is she?" And I would hear that over and over again, and not because I was disrespectful of Kevin, but we have a lot of vitality to us. We're very energetic. We're very interactive, and we're very sharp too. We bounce things back and forth and things like that. And so, but for me being new, hearing you're not very submissive, me thinking, no, I'm not submissive. Like that, to me, that was a personality call more than a role call. And I was like, no, I have a very dominant personality. I am a leader. I've run businesses. I've run my life. I've done huge financial decisions. And so coming to a place where the terminology we were using gave me a great feeling of self-esteem and worth, but also having chosen a person I could follow that really had the vision and the alignment with me, that I knew that that's where I wanted to go. The company was going to succeed and was going to hit the things that we really wanted in life.
So one of the struggles we had is, while we were using the term submissive, she continuously struggled with the sense that she couldn't do the job.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how to be a submissive. That doesn't resonate with who I authentically am.
It was like I pulled my pants over my head. It just didn't fit.
So evolving that language
really helped us
hit our stride and understand what our roles were, and gave us some guidance related to how to improve our relationship even beyond where it was.
Yeah, I can only imagine that, whatever role that you are choosing to accept in your life, you're being told that you're not that role, right? And not necessarily submissive, because I agree. I don't think submissive is a role. I think, who was it? Master Skip Chasey. I've tried to always credit him. He said that master slave let's start. Top and bottom is about the physical body. Dominant and submission is about the mental body. And master and slave is about the spiritual body. That was one of the first things that's for master slave that started to make sense for me. Because I too, while I'm part of the mass community and I do identify as leather, that took a long time for me to identify as leather because I don't wear leather. It's just not me, and it's not my aesthetic. Maybe at some point it will, but nonetheless, like the whole time, I knew that I craved more MS flavored relationships, even though that terminology didn't really sit well with me personally. And I still kind of gravitate towards those relationships, but I think it was Dr. Bob's book that I first read about the business model. But then I think it was actually, I believe it was one of Katie's writings that I got turned on to some years ago about the business model. And don't quote me, maybe it was Kevin. Nonetheless, I think that to round this thought off, going back to when you're looking to hire for like a CFO position, and the business is the relationship, you want something very powerful. And a lot of this for me is I've always framed it as extension of me, like a force multiplier, as the goddess Indigo says. I don't want someone that needs micromanage. That doesn't sound fun to me personally. And I'm not saying that slaves or submissives necessarily need micromanage, but to some level, I need a powerful human being to complement me, to challenge me. So I'm interested to hear more about your guys' relationship, because just the little that we've communicated, I've seen some of the banter, and it was funny early on in our discussions, Kevin, you're like, well, most of the smart things that come out of my mouth, Katie said, or something along those lines. And it was just like, I loved it. And like off air, some of the banter, right? And I'm interested to hear more how you make that work. So I will stop rambling and I'll turn it back over to you. So I guess my next question I'll follow up is, Katie, when you were transitioning from the term submissive to follower, how did that look? What looked different to you? What is different about a follower versus a submissive?
So I will start with when that first really struck me was in a Dr. Bob Rugel's class, and exactly what you were saying earlier, where that's in one of his books. And it was just a 3-sentence thing when I was sitting in the class. Kevin was in a different class at an event.
Oh no, we were sitting there together.
We were sitting there side by side. I was wearing blue.
I don't know.
And so anyways,
my memory is we turned and looked at each other and went, what?
There we go. That's right. Okay. It was the rope thing that was different. So he was saying this can show up in many different forms. Sometimes we have like magician and enchanted objects, and all the different forms. Kevin can list them better than I. Owner, pet, owner, property, all these things. And he said there's even a business model where you might have like a CEO and a COO, and it would be very much a business structure of two very powerful people, very dominant energies that are in a hierarchical relationship with somebody taking the lead. And Kevin and I looked at each other because we were in the same room in the same class.
And she was wearing blue.
And we looked at each other and we were like, it was like this huge light bulb moment, and nothing really changed other than the clarity and just knowing that it exactly fit. And then what do we do with language from there? From master slave was not fitting, but there's nothing less hot than going CEO, fuck me now, right? I mean, you can say, oh, master, fuck me now, and it sounds great. And I still won't say, oh, leader, follow me now. I mean, fuck me now. But it just seemed like the language didn't fit, and it was such a clarity of the roles. And from there, we thought, what can we do that is very inclusive? It doesn't matter who you are in this kind of relationship. There's the leader and there's the follower. Everybody can step into that in their minds when we discuss it.
And so there's some pieces to that. We're of the opinion that leader and follower are great umbrella terms, and that whether you're a master or an owner or whatever and one of my pet peeves is left of slash, right of slash, or big letter, little letter, or that sort of division, because there are master skips kind of schema there, right? I take that a little step further and I say top and bottom are roles in play, right? Sadist masochist are your relationship to pain. Leader follower are your roles, and dom sub are traits or personality styles, states or traits. You can be in a submissive state or have a submissive personality, right? So that can be transient or it can be relatively permanent. But those things don't line up perfectly. You can have a leader who is a bottom who is not a masochist, or you can have a follower who is not submissive but does like pain, or right, there's all kinds of ways these different axes can intersect, and it can be they're correlated. Sure, a follower is probably a bottom, but not necessarily, and so there's correlation, but it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. I know a lot of masters who bottom and are masochists. So what the hell was I trying to say about that?
You're just bringing people to class.
Listen to me, everyone. So I think where I was going with that,
The umbrella term is where you started.
The umbrella term leader and follower is a great role designation, because things like capital letter are a total fail, because not all DOMs are leaders, are tops, are sadists, for instance. And so saying capital letter or little letter or left of slash right of slash absolutely messes up the fact that those things aren't always true of each person.
People just have to quickly choose which part of their life they're going to apply to that and jump in.
So we use leader follower because they are fantastic umbrella terms for the leader role and the follower role. Whichever terms you prefer in your relationship, that's fantastic. Like whatever gets you wet or hard, use that. But for us, we actually like the umbrella term to apply to ourselves because it matches the business model. But even if you're not in the business model, saying which one of you is leader and follower is a useful way to communicate.
Wow, that was a very high soapbox. Do you want to calm down?
No, you did very well, and I appreciate
here. Work up a sweat.
that. You're working up a sweat. Well, I mean, you burned some calories, right? Well, words are powerful, and so something that over the last couple of years I've reflected on a lot of my authority-based relationships and the pitfalls specifically, and where I went wrong or where I could have done better, right? And personally, one of the things that I think that I could do better was use different words. And one of the words that I used, and I think that it blurred some lines, was partner. And I know that partner is readily accepted in most of the community. It's a nice, easy word. You can tell your boss, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But for me and my flavor of authority, I joke it's not a team. You can try out for my team, but I own the team. End of story. I don't play for the team. But when I bring that partner word in, it brings more of now I'm on the team type of a thing. And maybe I'm just the point guard or insert some higher level on the team. And I've put a lot of thought in this because I personally think that it's caused me problems. And there's probably a lot more to it than that, but just that single word. And then I started saying, well, I want my person. And I like that because it was ownership, and I love ownership. But that doesn't sound really good when you're calling the hotel and you're like, yeah, me and my person are going to be there at 2. I'm a business professional. That sounds not proper. Nonetheless, what I've settled on, and I appreciate your thoughts on this since you guys seem to appreciate words as much as me, or perhaps more, is significant other. I like this term because it's something that's already used in the public, but it's not commonly used. And for me, that helps bring some power to it. And, my person, whatever they may identify as, property, so on and so forth, that's significant to me. That is my significant other. And this is a term that I can use at the hotel, and it sounds better than my person. And for me, it doesn't dilute the authority that my partner does. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Kevin's been taking note.
I've got some. Do you want to fiddle with it first before I do?
There was this time when I went into Kevin's office when he was practicing psychology, and the receptionist said to me, "I'll tell Kevin his other half is here." And I said to her, "I'm not his other half, I'm his whole." So spelling is important. And this was not texted. And I say that as a joke that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, actually. You talk about team, and I immediately said to Kevin, I think the problem with team for some people is what we call vanilla drift.
And that's stolen from Dr. Bob.
Okay, not stolen.
Borrowed.
Passed along.
Shared.
We didn't take it away. So what happens with that term, if you say use team, Kevin and I are definitely a team. Definitely he is the leader and I follow, but we work side by side and we are aligned with our goals. And if it's something I'm not inclined to do or would maybe even disagree with his choice, I am right behind him trying to make that succeed. So I definitely feel that there's a teamwork to that. The problem with the word team for many people is that concept will cause people to drift into more of a vanilla style relationship of boyfriend, girlfriend, or girlfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, instead of being constantly aware of the leader-follower dynamic and how important that is.
Team potentially reduces the sense of hierarchy, but we are super clear in an organization. Katie would be on my action team, right? Or in a military structure, I would be in charge, but I would still be part of the team. I would still eat the same place they ate. I would still sleep the same place they slept. I would still charge the same hill they charged. So I would still be part of the action. I would still be involved in the same messy situations. I would still be getting my boots dirty just like them, but I'd be the one that they had to answer to. And so we are fine with team, but we conscientiously remain aware that it is a hierarchy still. And so I think the risk of vanilla drift is there if you just let it be too partnery, I guess.
Partnery?
Partnery.
You who
because
love
words are important.
Oh my gosh.
And I like how you phrased it, vanilla drift. That is probably a word that I've been searching for or a phrase for 2 or 3 years. Because I think that when I looked back and reflected at some of my relationships, that's what I seen that word partner brought into the relationship. And to be honest, for me, right? I remember, oh man, it was a while ago, probably 16, 18, give or take. And I ended a relationship with my property because I fell in love with them. And that wasn't negotiated. And there's a long story, and I don't want to take the story, but at the end of the day, I had a conversation with someone that I very much respect inside of the MS community. And the short and sweet of his conversation was, Dustin, do you love your cat? I said, yes. He said, you own your cat, right? I said, yes. He said, did you plan to love your cat? I said, no. He said, do you still own your cat? I said, yes. And that's the 100,000-foot view of that conversation. But for me, I think that when I use that term partner, that it brings in more of that boyfriend feel for me. We have a question from the audience that asking for the definition of what is vanilla drift.
Probably finding it in Dr. Bob's work is the right way to get the full answer to that. But vanilla drift would be becoming lazy about your roles potentially in such a way that you quit highlighting hierarchy, you start making accommodations or compromises in terms of, well, if you want to do it that way, I guess we will. Not being mindful and intentional on a daily basis about the fact that you're in a hierarchical relationship and just letting it be a marriage, just letting it be a boyfriend-girlfriend, just letting it doing egalitarian things and not paying attention to the fact that you've negotiated something different than that. And so what happens is default relationship from when you were in high school or whatever starts to happen without anybody really noticing. Very small little compromises in terms of how you manage hierarchy or how often you touch back on hierarchy. And over time you realize, holy crap, we haven't done anything hierarchical. I haven't made any major decisions or even minor decisions. It's easy to have become, particularly for a leader, to become lazy in the relationship and stop doing their job, creating the frame, creating the hierarchy,
making the decisions,
creating the structure, making the decisions. Especially if the relationship is going really well, there's less to do as a leader. I have less stomping around and pointing to do, right? And therefore, like, what am I going to do? Cobble up something to wave my finger at him? You know, what? And so figuring out, what do I do as a leader when the relationship is amazing that makes it still be hierarchical? I think what often happens is you put your feet up and you say, I'm a king and the world is wonderful. And then it turns into a vanilla relationship.
Well, as you were saying some of this, like, I'm sitting here and still currently processing some of my past relationships. How I look at it is losing some of that intention. For me, I like the phrase intentional relationship. Excuse me. And I'll go ahead and throw myself under every wheel of the bus when it gets easy as a leader. Like you said, I kick up my feet and I go about my day. And before I realize it, I've drifted back into the place that I never wanted to be. And then next thing you know, somebody kicked the stool out of my feet and now I'm frantic, like, wait a second, this isn't what I signed up for. And this is something where I've really had to process, because as the person that accepts the responsibility of leader in my relationships, I have to accept the responsibility for kicking my feet up and allowing that footstool to be kicked out of under me and not necessarily know where I am inside of that relationship.
Yeah, if drift happens, it is almost always at the leader's doorstep. I'm not sure that you could lay that at the follower's doorstep
I would disagree.
See, here we go. Please go ahead.
Sometimes, and I'm not gendering this, although as a female follower, sometimes it's very difficult to speak of anything different. Sometimes the moods and the emotions of the follower starts to take charge. And that's where it starts. That's where the drift starts, because a leader will be like, oh my goodness, if I do that my followers gonna be so upset, or they're going to have such a bad day, or they're not going to like this. And then they hold back from making those harder decisions, or pushing towards growth or change. And then at that point, the mood and the emotions of the follower is in charge of the relationship. And that's one of the worst things, is to have your moods and emotions in charge of anything. And so there's a drift there, because there's a compromise from the leader, because there's too much hassle to leading that person, but it's initiated from the followers not having enough self-control and self-management.
See, and I would say that that's exactly
We're gonna have a disagreement right here.
No. I absolutely agree with you, but I would still say that is on the leader's doorstep to say, I am not going to allow the fact that this is going to be upsetting make me fail to do my job. And what happens is you get lazy, you get complacent, you figure, oh, that order isn't worth it. I'll enforce this thing, but not that thing. Because
that was a little disrespectful, but they're having a bad day.
They're having a bad day, and so I'm gonna let that one go. And over time, less and less is enforced. More and more moods and upsets are allowed to make the difference. More and more compromises to decisions, so that, anyway.
That's a big answer to the vanilla drift. There you go.
Well, something that I like words, and more so I like trying to condense thoughts.
Wow, that would be me.
And something that I've heard a while ago, and I had to like sit on it for a while and see how it sat with me, was consistency. And for me, consistency is very powerful inside of a relationship. Like your example was, oh, well, they were just in a bad mood, I'm going to let it slide. Well, in my opinion, if you're going to let it slide for a bad mood, you're also going to let it slide for whatever other excuse, right? And a bad mood is well, what is the bad mood? Is it, I try to take pragmatic approach when I make decisions, or at least I think I do. Nonetheless, is the bad mood associated to a death in the family? Okay, I'm going to offer you a little more compassion there. Is the bad mood because I won't spank your butt with your favorite paddle? Go do it. No negotiation, right? So it depends on how you quantify that bad mood, at least for me personally. And this is where something else I've been trying to distill down when it comes to consistency is keeping it simple. Like, I love that saying, keep it simple, stupid. And I struggle with it because I'm an engineer by trade. And a lot of times early on in my relationships, I overcomplicated. Like, okay, well, as soon as you get here, you're gonna do X, Y, and Z. Every time you're gonna see me, you're gonna do PDQ, so on and so forth. But then reality sets in where something prevents one of those actions from taking place. So to like round off the thought, I've been more deliberate with what my protocols are and how overarching they are. And more so, I've came back to making me more active in the relationship. Meaning, instead of just saying, here's a protocol, every time this comes up, this is how you handle it, because I used to fetishize that stuff, I make the decision real time. You're just in a bad mood because I'm not using your favorite paddle? Tough luck, right? You're in a bad mood because a loved one passed? Let me run a bath for you, right? Dramatically different responses. But consistently making the decision is, for me, been more impactful than to just make one decision, establish a protocol, and then kick my feet up. Off my soapbox now.
there's a couple things related to that. Katie and I have almost no rituals or protocols. We have just a very few, in part because never expect a thing unless you're going to inspect that thing. And that means that I'm going to spend an awful lot of my time trying to figure out, is she doing X, Y, and Z every time the way I said she should? And that's an awful lot of opportunities for her to do things wrong. It's an awful lot of opportunity, right? It is.
I don't think it's juicy. Protocols, I mean, only a few protocols are really juicy to you. And some people really do get off on protocols, and it's really important to their relationship, a structure.
Right. And the other piece is, once protocols start getting missed, people tend to just let them lie in a shallow grave instead of officially retiring them. And then they become a burden on the relationship where
Failure.
it is a failure that I as a leader have failed because I haven't corrected it and I haven't ended it, either one. So it is an ongoing expectation that you aren't doing and that I'm not calling you on. And so one of the mistakes folks make is that they put into place protocols, they let them get sloppy, and then they fail to either revitalize them or end them. And they are burdensome on the relationship there forward.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, just retire it and say, well, I thought it was a great idea, to have you on your knees every time I went through a threshold in the house, but man, that's slowing everything down. Let's not do that, and just retire that and say, it was good, but not going to fit.
The blowjob while drinking a cup of coffee, like ritual, mostly results in scalding. It's not nearly the ritual you would hope for.
Reality
I
hits your heart.
Yeah. I talk about fantasy versus reality often, and I can see how hot coffee and a good blowjob sounds great, but there's a reason why McDonald's coffee cups say hot, right? Because of that lady that spilled all that coffee in her lap, right?
Right.
Dustin, it was when you said consistency was a word that really resonated with you. It immediately made me think of my answer when people will say, Katie, you are dominant, you are competent, you are financially stable and able. Why do you choose to follow? Why do you choose this style of relationship? And first, it was the erotic part, for sure. At the very first, that was what kind of got us rolling on it. Was freaking hot.
Sure.
But this is 22 years later. Something else has kept us here and made this so successful.
I mean, it's still hot.
It's still hot. I will admit, it's still hot. And my answer to that is, I say this is not going to be as erotic as you hope. I crave order. And that is what I absolutely desire in a relationship. I want to know.
Or order as the opposite of chaos, not order as in being bossed around.
Not as in getting orders. I crave order in my life. I want to know what is expected of me and what I can expect of my partner. Oops. My other teammate. Let's just keep on going. So what to expect. And so I know my role. I know the expectations. I know that when we have a conflict or a disagreement, how that's going to be resolved. I know that Kevin has our relationship as the ultimate focus on each decision he makes. There's not selfishness involved. So that for me, when you talk about consistency, that craving order is what really had me here and had this grow so well for us.
Wow, I appreciate that. I think you clicked a light bulb in my head, and I've talked about it in many a ways, but not as how you have. And I think that's, I use the word consistency. I like the word order. When I'm instructing someone to clean my house, I talk to them and and instruct them that I prioritize tidiness over cleanliness because I love order. And just like you said, I like to know how to be a good Dustin, how to be a good leader, because it's clearly defined, right? Whereas in other relationships that I've been in, I didn't really know what was expected of me. I didn't know what to expect of them. And there's a quote that I absolutely love. It's unspoken expectations lead to hidden resentments.
Yes.
And wow, that was my early dating. I didn't know what to expect out of them. They didn't know what to expect out of me. There was no consistency. And that's why I think that for me to be a good person in another person's life romantically, I need to have authority, because a lot of what authority for me is responsibility. If I didn't have authority, I'd probably be reckless with them romantically, honestly. But oh, go ahead.
There was a couple things I was going to say there. One is you're talking about being able to discern kind of who you are, what your role is, who you are within a relationship, and have some clarity around those things. One of the things I liked about discovering the terms leader follower and leaning into them is there's an awful lot of information about how to be a good leader. There's 400 ways to be a master, and not many of them are well documented, and those that are documented aren't necessarily the kind of master I want to be. But there's a lot of extraordinary information about how to be a leader. And so if my goal in this relationship is to be excellent at leadership, wow, I have got a whole bunch of resources that are outside of the writings in the kink community. And so
pick up a leadership book, like a really good popular leadership book, and there are tools and information there. It's amazing.
So related to knowing who you're going to be and how you're going to be in that relationship, that was one of the things that really made a difference for me, is leaning into that leadership model meant that I knew some things about what my role was supposed to be like. The other thing I wanted to do is spend just a second. Katie, you made a note, authority transfer. Did you want me to talk about that?
Yes, but first of all, I just grabbed these straight off our bookshelf here. For example, these are all vanilla books. Let's call them vanilla.
Well, two are by Jocko Willink, the Extreme Ownership and Leadership Strategy and Tactics. Then there's the really good one, Leaders by General Stanley McChrystal. Choosing to Lead, Kenneth Clark. Anyway, leadership books
abound.
Are Extreme Ownership is amazing. Anyway, what did you want? I have things I wanted to say about authority transfer, but what was your note related to?
One of the things Dustin said is, let's talk about some of the terminology you guys use and why you embrace that. And I think we haven't touched why we use authority transfer instead of power exchange.
Is that an okay direction for a minute, or would you like to do some other question?
Actually, that's our first question that I was supposed to ask you. So we can start there an hour in.
I was going to say we're an hour in, and we might as well hit that one.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
We spent a lot of time with power exchange as kind of the terminology that we embraced.
International Power Exchange.
Yes, we are International Power Exchange, right? We won the International Power Exchange title, 2017. So we embraced that term. We liked that term. It felt authentic to us. And then we started thinking about power is not really what I want to be exercising in this relationship. And the more you study things like social psychology, you see that in relationships, there are sources of power. And the more powerful person typically gets their way. And so sources of power are who has the biggest muscles, who has the loudest voice, who has the most money, who has the better job, who has the better education, who has the most alternative opportunities for partners. All those things and many others are sources of power in the relationship. And the person with the most power in, if we're talking about a theoretically egalitarian relationship, right?
Somebody has more power.
Partners are theoretically equal, and yet they are not, because someone has more power, and that more powerful person will typically get their way because they have the sources of power, right? So one of the amazing things, and some of this is a peek into some of the papers that Dr. Brad Sagrin and I are writing related to authority transfer, but one of the key things that we believe are a unique benefit of authority transfer relationships is that they disconnect power from authority, power from control. The person with the most power in the relationship does not necessarily mean that they're the leader in the relationship. Katie is smarter than me. She is wiser than me. She is richer than me. She is more self-disciplined than me. She is more creative than me. She could have more partners than me, right? She has many of the sources of power that would typically say she got to be the leader. But we negotiated and she said, I really like it when you stand on my throat. You be the leader.
It was that simple at the start. Ethan's has proved himself to have a lot of other good qualities.
I have other benefits, but and so one of the things that we did related to power exchange is think power is not really what we want to focus on, because like if there was somebody in a grocery store that I didn't want in the grocery store, I could grab them by their hair or by their hoodie or by their wrist and I could drag them out of the store. I would have the power to do so. That does not mean I have the authority to do so. Very few people have the authority to grab you by your wrist and drag you out of the store. Many people might have the power to do that. And so I don't want to exercise power over Katie. I want to have the legitimate right to lead, which is what authority means, the legitimate right. And so, and I don't believe that there's any exchange of power. I don't want Katie to be less powerful. I don't believe I become more powerful. So there's no exchange of power. And so we end up with this whole convoluted thing that ends up saying, what's really happened here is not Katie has become less powerful and transferred power. There isn't really a power interplay of any kind. It is that she has transferred authority of aspects of her life to me, and I am responsible for managing those aspects. And so authority transfer is what's going on, and power exchange absolutely is not for us. Go ahead. Sorry, Keith.
There is power exchange in our relationship.
Boy, this interview is going great, isn't it? Tell me more.
I would say the power exchange lives on in play and sex. There is, you become very powerful. I become very, very small, less powerful. And so for us, that is sexual, that is play, that is erotic.
That's true.
That is scenes and things like that. That's where the power exchange is.
I'm sorry, we have to go now. I have something I have to take care of.
Power exchange.
I mean, they can't see you technically, so.
Right.
You're gonna
All of a sudden here, look.
So that's the down low on authority transfer, and there's a lot of reasons that we shifted, and other folks can embrace power exchange, but we think technically, and certainly for us,
it's a better fit.
Authority transfer is more accurate and a better fit.
So I had an aha moment there.
Third one.
Yeah, right. And it was like you read my mind or something. I've talked often, there's a Neanderthal in me. I just want to grab pretty people by their hair and throw them in my cave and do whatever I want to them, right? But what you clicked was I don't have the authority. While I've openly admitted that I have that desire, I've never acted on that desire because my morals prevent me from causing harm. And I know what kind of harm that would cause. Like, could I do that? Sure. Would I do that? Absolutely not. And a big thing for me is when somebody actually gives me that authority. And that's really, I think, what is a big attraction for me to it. Because like you said, I physically, I am powerful to some level, right? And I could take various things that I may or may not desire, but it's much different when somebody willingly gives that to you, right? Like another moment I lit up when, I actually made a note of it where, I took a video note of it, but where Katie was like, I just wanted him to stand on my throat and say, "You be the leader." And it was just like that's perfect, right? You made that conscious choice that you didn't necessarily want to be the leader. And in that moment, he was, even if it was just a sexy moment, but then that's where that power exchange came from. I don't know. I'm circling around. I guess what I'm getting at is he didn't have to exert that authority over you. You willingly gave it to him. Could he have
Yes.
stepped on your neck and said, "Hey, I'm the leader"? Probably, possibly.
Until the
But the
police
fact,
showed up. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, right? And I think that I gotta sit on that thought more. But I really appreciate that differentiating between the power versus authority. And this is where I'm going to recommend a book to you. You may or may not have read it. It's called Power versus Force by David Hawkins.
Thank you.
I have a feeling one or both of you might like it.
Noted.
It's dense. I warn you, it is dense, really dense. But it's valuable information in my opinion. So to move things forward, is there any other thoughts we have around this that you'd like to get out?
That's good.
You mean like notes I've taken that I should fiddle with?
If you want to. If
Yeah,
not,
David,
I was
you
going to
would.
ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead with a question. I've got little bits and pieces, but none of them are worth a topic at this point. I'll tag them in somewhere if they come up. Go with your question.
Perfect. So we already kind of touched on the second question I was going to ask you, and that was, what is the reasoning for using the terms leader and follower? I think the next valuable question I see asking is, how do cultural norms impact authority dynamics?
Oh, let me.
Knock her out.
So as a female follower, I have been challenged that I'm undermining all the things that women's liberation and the women's movement has accomplished, over these last generations. And here I am saying, this man, I need a man in charge of me, or I'm choosing to follow a man. And I came out of a faith that was a male-led faith. It didn't matter if the person had the qualities of leadership. If you were born with a penis, you were in charge of the family. So I came out of that faith when I met Kevin. And so I was kind of used to that concept, but not attached to it. And of course, physiologically, I bought him. I that's what's erotic for me. So that's where we ended up. The answer I have to people about the women's liberation and what I'm doing for women's equality is that women have been fighting for years to have the right to choose. Right to choose what is right for their life, what is right for their bodies, what's right for their relationships. I choose this. And so this is what is right. For me to live differently because of women's liberation would take away my liberation. That would take away my ability to make the perfect choice for my relationship and my life. And so I choose this. This is not put upon me. I don't have to live this way. Society and religion has imposed this upon me. And so that is what I would like to say about the societal norms. But I'm also very careful that Kevin does not get judged outside these four walls of our home as being a domineering jerk. He doesn't behave that way, and I don't address him as master in public. I don't address him in ways that make people question what this dynamic is like. When people see us, they see us as very respectful, loving couple. We had children in the house when we first got together. I came with children, and they see us. We talk about society and society's views. Our children see us as extremely respectful of each other, adoring of each other, and caring of each other. And even as growing up in the household, what we did was subtle, and we made sure of that, but they didn't have the impression that Kevin was domineering in any way. And I would say things like, instead of saying, let me check with Kevin, see if I can do that.
Let me see if I'm allowed.
Let's see if I'm allowed. I would say, I'd love to have lunch with you, my daughter. Let me just check Kevin's schedule, make sure there's no conflict, and I'll get right back to you. Or something like that, right? And so the way I talked about our relationship to others helps people have the right perspective on that it is not in a harmful situation that I need to be rescued out of. And Kevin came from he came from a single mom. He was a new age guy.
Oh yeah, being a leader in a relationship was anathema to me. You're supposed to be super, super soft and warm and cuddly and egalitarian and put her needs first and all kinds of stuff.
Well, you do put my needs
I do put your needs first, as it turns out, but just not the way my mom expected. Yeah. So,
how do you deal with society's perspective on what you do?
Well, I guess part of what I wanted to say about that is because we are male lead, female follow, we have the problem that we are fish in water and have a hard time seeing the water that we're in, right? We've been we've been coded in cultural expectations our entire lives and have fallen into the roles that those expectations have set us up for. But we are also fairly introspective, self-aware people who have lived, I have been in a lot of non-hierarchical relationships and not enjoyed them particularly.
That's right. You're giving a good go.
So I have attempted egalitarian an awful lot, and it wasn't a great fit for me. So I guess part of what I would say is we are enacting culturally accepted and it kind of
historical
expected roles, and yet we aren't. I don't think we've just fallen into those because they are the cultural expectation, and the cultural expectation mostly has changed at this point to egalitarian, or largely, maybe not mostly yet, but largely. I guess the other thing I was going to say is that we are super cautious.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone to ever worry about Katie's safety. We don't want anyone to ever say, "Oh, look at that dude being all bossy and asshat." And that would be in our home anyway. Like the sorts of things that would concern people, I don't know that they're common with us regardless, but I don't say, "Hey girl, go get me that thing" in public.
No.
I say, "Would you please go get me that?" And you say, "Oh, absolutely, I'd love to."
That is the key, is when Kevin says, "Would you please go grab me a coffee?" Right? And we're in public in a gathering or something like that. And I say, "Yes, of course, I'd love to." What we hear in our head is, "Girl, go get me a coffee." Yes, sir. right? We don't have to use those words because we know. And there's subtle things that we've done because of all these years of trying to not concern anybody. And I know people, their authentic selves, they go out in public, they be them authentic selves, and that's the journey they've chosen. For us, subtlety, especially since he was a psychologist, and often having to do, child therapies and things like that, we had to be very subtle, and we got little messages between us, and laughter is the best. Oh my goodness. I'll give you an example. I had just had a surgery, and we were out with a bunch of friends at some campground, and I said to Kevin, I don't want them to know about it. I'll just be really, quiet and careful, and we'll just keep this quiet. And at some point, something needed to be got from the camper, and I'm like, I'll go get that. And Kevin snapped his fingers, pointed at a chair, and said, "No, you'll sit." Right? Just like, because he was like in super protective mode, but these people were all vanilla people, right? And I sat, because of course somebody goes, "You'll sit." I sat, and I thought, oh my goodness, look what we just did. And I just laughed, right? That's what I did. I just busted into laughter and went, "Yes, sir." And he went and got the thing from the camper, right? And everybody immediately, it was completely diffused. It was lighthearted, and, and so just joyful laughter, not laughing at him, but just joyful laughter often covers up things like that.
Yeah, so I don't know if
that was a big answer.
I don't know if we actually hit your question very well, but
no, I mean, I think you did, because there are, and I don't remember exactly what your analogy was, but like being a fish in the pond, like we can't see it. And like I was kind of raised where male-led relationships was kind of the norm. At the same time, my mom was like the first one in the family kind of to sort of push back against that, whether she consciously knew that or not. Nonetheless, like I too try to be conscious of that. I don't want to represent myself, my person, or anybody really poorly. And I think that another thing that I got from all of that kind of sat with me really well, because it's something that I've utilized often, is asking questions. And I do this for many reasons, partly because I don't really like to bark orders. I mean, even in my professional life, for my employees, I rarely told them what to do. It'd be like made up name Johnny. "Hey, Johnny, we need to get this done. Can you run over here and grab this for me?"
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't me telling this person what to do. I like how that you framed it, where in your head you heard this, and in his head he heard that. Something that, once again, going back to reflecting on some of my relationships, one of the things where I think asking questions has diluted some of that authority, because a lot of the sexiness is the do as you're told. But I think when you frame it that way, and when you think about, well, we're asking it because we're in this type of a scenario, but this is what it really translates. It's the, what's the rhetorical question, right?
right. So Dustin, one of the interesting pieces that we've played with between Katie and I is a question about folks who are suffering vanilla drift, or are concerned they're suffering vanilla drift, or like we have this suspicion that there's maybe two versions of vanilla drift. And I haven't had a chance to ask Dr. Bob about this, but Katie and I are fairly subtle in the way we express our authority transfer. A lot of the time, it is with gestures, it is with questions, it is with very gentle expectations, because she treats my hopes as absolute guidance, right? And so I don't have to
Flex.
be flexy and say, do this thing or else, right? I can just say, you know what, I'd really like to go grab a taco today. And she'll say, I'm not much into that, but it sounds great. Let's go.
Done.
And what actually has happened is I've said, get in the fucking car, I'm having tacos because I know you don't like them. And she said, yes, sir, I will. And so the question is that vanilla drift? We're having a very vanilla conversation. And anyone that looked at it would say, look at that nice couple. And so, and if we weren't aware of the way we are being subtle, if we weren't aware that there were those power subtexts, it would be easy for one or the other of us to look at that and say, wow, that was super vanilla. That didn't get me wet at all. He didn't even kick me as he told me to go get in the car, right? And so the question is, how many people who think they're suffering from vanilla drift have actually just become skillful at subtlety, and therefore they don't feel the invigorating power of raw, flexy ordering about, and instead they're so in tune with each other that it becomes gentle and subtle and easy, and they misinterpret that and say, I guess it's not a power exchange anymore. Now, I think the other half of that is a lot of folks do get lazy and fall straight into vanilla drift, and it's a shit show for having the authority transfer last. Katie has a thing to say before you.
I would like to add that when we are home, it is important that stepping up of the interactions and the commands and that dynamic gets charged up at some times. And that is really important because that is, to us, part of the power exchange part, right? Part of the sexy dynamic part of it. Plus, just heightening the awareness of, this is my leader. This is my sir. This is the person that I will follow into battle. And when he says, go get me a fucking coffee, or I don't want that, change it up, and I say, yes, sir, that really reinforces dynamic. So we still need that. And we do that, to some extent at home or in bed. And that is really important to us.
So I had the aha moment with your tacos again. I think you guys might be reading me enough where you're seeing them. But when you said the subtleness of the tacos, Kevin, you have the power to say, Katie, we're going to get tacos. There's nothing you can do about it. It's different when you ask her and she says, when you knowingly know that she doesn't like tacos in this analogy, which I don't know if she does or not.
True story.
True story. She doesn't like them much.
True story. Okay, so if I ever go out to dinner with you guys, don't invite you to tacos. Okay, check.
No,
I'll remember.
go ahead and invite us.
Oh my gosh.
It's fair. But the authority, right? This person is willingly doing what you want, right? They're willingly going to get those tacos.
Happily. Joyfully. Yeah.
And I think that something else that I kind of thought about that is like that first time, it might not have been subtle. That just might have been how it could have been framed because of the company, right? But that first time, there is the potential for the follower to not follow. And I think that for me as a leader, sometimes I genuinely do want to test my follower. Like, I know you don't like tacos. Do you want to go? I want to go get tacos. I love tacos, and I know some of the best taco spots around, right? And you don't have to eat anything. We can get you something else, but I'm going to get tacos. That first time, they may not know that we're going to get something else. They may not, they can balk, they can resist. And some of that, maybe that is some of that still me flexing of power, right? Like, I got to make the decision, I want tacos.
Right.
But at the same time, when they consciously say, sounds great, let's go, that I think for me, that's where it reaffirms that I don't have power over this person, that I have authority over this person. So you kind of touched on your daily life, and I have that question, and we got about 30 minutes into 2 hours. We'll see if we can get through the last couple questions. Hopefully. So what does your daily life look like?
I think this is where the executive model really helped and launched us into being even better functioning as an authority transfer relationship. Once we had that executive model in place, all of a sudden it started really making sense. The things that Kevin would delegate, the fact that I would go gather information and bring it to him so he could make the best decision on the next thing. And so bringing that back down to daily life.
We were working on a project a couple days ago, and I had to remove some sun blocks out of a window. And so as I stood there next to Katie, I pulled out my phone and I sent her a text that said, look for solutions for a better way to manage the sun coming through this window. And I know that that will get taken care of, and she'll come back to me and say, I like this solution, and here's 2 other ones. What do you think? Which one do you want me to order? And so part of it is my ability to just delegate on the fly what things I want taken care of, and know that she will report back to me with options. We usually do a to-do checklist on a daily basis where I hear what she has in mind, I say what I'm doing, and I manage or make decisions about, no, wait, we're going to go do this other thing instead, cancel your entire list, or, you know what, my thing is more important than your thing. Let's drop 3 things off your list so you've got some time to help with this thing of mine. And so I have an active hand in time management and the use of her focus. And I get to hear things like, her project is a really big one, and if I could run the grill for the afternoon, that would make a big difference. Or she's got a list that's absolutely overwhelming and her resilience is low, and if I could take these 2 or 3 parts, that would make a big difference. And at that point, I have the option to say, I'm not taking over those parts, but we are putting them off until next week, and then you can do them. Like, I don't want to do them, but I don't want you doing them today because I'm taking good care of you.
From my standpoint, like I'm pretty energetic. I am a very busy person. I like to accomplish a lot. My view of how, like, one of the wonderful things about the perspective we have on this relationship of him being CEO is that I don't have to like be the perfect submissive person that gets everything accomplished and just, my knees start to bleed and I have a headache and I have to just keep on going because service is everything. I am here to serve him. And if I'm overwhelmed, or if my list is too long, or I just can't see my way to the end, him not having any awareness of that as a person in charge of this company is wrong. I can't expect him to be a mind reader. I can't expect him to notice everything. And so I had to learn, because I'm not a person that usually would ask for help at all, but I had to learn that part of the way this relationship works is I come to him and I say, I'm overwhelmed. Could you look at what I've got going on today and give me some feedback on how I'm going to manage this? I don't say, hey, I've got so much on my list. Would you just like take out the trash and actually mow the lawn? I mean, that would be a whole different thing, right? But instead saying, I am completely overwhelmed, or I can feel a headache coming on. What am I supposed to do about today's list? And then him, as my leader, is able to look at that and say, this is the way we're going to solve this issue. This is what we're going to do with your time, with your energy, or with your health.
And sometimes I say, go lay down for a half hour with some medicine in you and come back and tell me how you're doing. Sometimes I say, what are the 2 things that have to get done today? Let's work on those together so that you can have the rest of the day off. So active management of our processes in our life is part of how our daily life goes. We wake up every morning and probably 6 out of 7 days we do fitness. We do probably 2 hours of fitness every day, whether that's going to the gym for a little bit of resistance training and cardio, whether that's we teach fitness, so we have our own routines that we do on the regular in order to keep them fresh, and so we probably do 2 hours of fitness every morning.
Usually somewhere in that fitness, we'll have a good mile-long walk, and we'll talk about the day. What does today look like? What's our priorities today? But on the bigger picture, even, we'll often, and it's usually me that'll say, I see the month that's coming up, and I think we just need to sit down. And we literally have like a business meeting. We put out our calendars, we put out our lists, we put out some of the things that are coming up on the horizon.
She is extraordinary at organization and planning and scheduling and all of those things. And so I'll say, I need these 3 things booked, find the place in the schedule for them, and she'll make that happen and tell me where they go. But she'll also say, did you notice that we have guests coming next weekend? We have a doctor's appointment the Monday following, and we've got this other thing Friday before they arrive. That means that if we want to have this other project done, it's either Wednesday, Thursday, or Wednesday next week, because all the intervening time is booked. How would you like to handle that, sir? Oh, well, I didn't notice that all those intervening days were filled with crap. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. We're either speeding up and getting it done now or shoving it off a week, which may or may not be acceptable, right? So she's got a lot of that skill to bring those sorts of things to my attention so I can make good decisions and not get caught with my pants down when I don't want them down.
Our days are absolutely interlaced with sexy interactions. I am free use to Kevin, and that is a really important part of the way our daily life looks.
Yeah, so I entertain myself with her body all throughout the day. It's kind of like we have 22 hours of foreplay a day, and then
where's the sleep? Oops.
There's foreplay in there. There's you just don't realize it.
Yeah, I know, right? And like, that's a kink too.
I don't care if you're sleeping. What are you talking about?
Here we go.
So there's an awful lot of fun and recreation and casual touch, and we teach a class on free use, and I share some of my secrets for how to make that incredible. So there's often some mix of physical labor and administrative stuff that we carefully blend so that we're not sick of either one too much.
It sounds pretty simple. I mean, it sounds like you just make the decisions, right? And at the end of the day, Katie brings you information to help you make better decisions.
Absolutely. Our favorite words are flexible and adaptable. We are not rigid in what daily life looks like, we really do.
But we do like consistency, we try to make sure that things happen on a regular basis, that our fitness is managed, that, so we go for order, we go for consistency, and at the same time, we might wake up someday and I'm going to say, get us coffees because we're about to play video games for the next 6 hours. And she said,
I actually did.
Yeah.
Fair. Quick question from the audience. Is this free use class online?
It is not. We teach it at conferences occasionally when it's requested.
Are we allowed to talk about other podcasts? There is a podcast about it.
Of course. I imagine I probably listened to it.
Erotic Awakenings has a podcast of us on free use. And we'd be happy to come back and talk to you about it.
we could do that.
But there is
I
nothing else
can think
online
of
right
12 more topics at least I'd
Yeah,
like to talk
right.
to you guys about, right?
now. Oh, I feel honored.
Yeah, I know this has been a great conversation, and I do want to kind of round it out to be respectful of our times, our guest times, and also all our energy. So I think the next question I have, and I think this is going to be kind of a big question, so I apologize for limiting you on time, but if you can be concise with your thoughts, it'd be appreciated. What do you see as the benefits of authority transfer for the leader and for the follower?
Really? This is the one that I have to be concise on?
You should be.
You know what? I'll give it if you got the energy, we can give it another half hour if we need it. I mean,
No.
I
I can.
You could do this in
can,
6 minutes and 22 seconds.
Wow.
Oh boy.
I should
Hit
turn
the
on my
stopwatch,
timer.
somebody.
I should turn on my timer. So Dr. Brad Sager and I have done some preliminary research about this. So we actually have some data related to the benefits of authority transfer relationships. And one of the ones that I mentioned is the separation of power from control, right? The fact that the powerful person in the relationship isn't necessarily going to be the one that's the leader. That's one of the unique benefits. Other benefits are...
Are we talking about us or overarching?
Us
Let's do us.
Okay.
Let's do us.
Rather than the paper.
Yes.
Katie once said, as we were debating and discussing why someone gets to be the leader and someone else gets to be the follower.
Oh, why does this keep coming back to haunt me? Oh my gosh.
We were discussing this, and I said, well, it has to do with the fact that I what did I say about that? I like being in control. I like being powerful. I like...
You like making the decisions.
Making decisions. And as we came around through this discussion, I'm missing some of my great reasons for being a leader. Katie said, I think the person that trusts the least has to be the leader.
This has haunted me ever since, Dustin.
I love it.
The person who is least able to trust.
Well,
has
you
to
trust me.
Well, yes, but
you trust your own decision making best of all.
Yes, that's probably true. You have a contact issue?
We'll carry the show.
I don't know what I got going on, but something's in.
We'll just keep
in my
talking.
eye.
We'll just keep
Yep.
talking.
But that's not right. For me, the benefits would be that the clarity of roles, the expectation of personal growth. Absolutely. We are always just looking for the next place where we can just attend to and make just a little bit better. Not that we're dissatisfied where we are, but we love to learn and become better or become more satisfied in life and attending to the things that don't quite fit and fixing that. So that personal growth part, huge.
We spent months trying to go through a process to absolutely eliminate gossiping, complaining, and criticizing from our daily conversation. There's a book called 21 Days to a Complaint-Free World, I think. And so we tried to go 3 weeks without any complaining, gossiping, or criticizing as one of our personal growth projects.
It's an amazing experience.
Yeah, so it took me about 6 months to put together 21 days without gossiping, complaining, and criticizing.
Are you complaining about that?
Would you be quiet, you? No, I'm noting my challenges.
But that was part of us just saying there's some things we could improve upon, right? And so personal growth for sure. Benefits. Hot as hell. Oh my God.
Hot.
It's
Yeah.
really sexy.
Having unlimited access to a hot girl like you.
We are 22 years together and we have a fantastic sex life still.
I think that like you say, the role clarity is super important to me, and I guess the meta communication part. We communicate well, but we also have clarity about raising voices. We have clarity about decision making. We have clarity about problem solving. We have clarity about all of those things. I don't have to wonder how they're going to play out. I know how they're going to play out.
Manipulation.
There isn't going to be manipulation.
You don't have to question my intent.
Katie will always be doing her best to make our relationship a success and my decisions a success. And there's extraordinary peace and comfort to that. If she recommends a thing, I never have to wonder what the subtleties behind it are, what the hidden messages are, what the manipulation is, I never have to worry about tit for tat. If I do, a lot of people end up in relationships with a lot of bean counting. If you get to do A, then I get to do B. If you get to buy that red dress, then I get to go fishing with boys. If you get to, right, whatever the tit for tat is, our relationship has entirely eliminated that process. And instead, technically, we talk about a higher level of construal. We work in our relationship toward a higher level of construal where the things we do are relationship enhancing. And so when I'm working on a project, I'm not just going through the obnoxious process of gathering information for Katie to do taxes. I'm benefiting the relationship as the leader. And so this higher level of construal idea says that all the things we do in this relationship, we interpret as, we reframe as relationship enhancing activities for one another. And so it eliminates all of the bean counting and stuff that a lot of people do, of keeping track of who emptied the cat litter the most versus who emptied the trash the most or whatever.
I think that's good.
So that's some of the stuff, yeah.
No, I think that covers a vast majority of what it is, and I think the one thought, because I want to be concise too, so I won't
That was not very
ramble.
concise.
That
Right.
concise, Kevin, sorry.
No, but you covered a lot, right? And that was a big question. So for you to do it in, I don't think it was 6 minutes
No,
and
I don't think
26
so either.
seconds.
Anyways, please,
But-
what we were going to say, Dustin.
Is you talked about like keeping those beans, right? And counting those beans. And early on, as you know, a young adult going into the dating world, I realized that I kept track of beans, and I didn't realize it because I was so busy. Early in my 20s, I was so focused on business and progressing my life that, oh, you didn't do this, or you did something that I don't really appreciate. I don't got time to address it. The bean goes in the container. And then eventually I had time away from work. I had extra energy, so on and so forth. And now this whole can of beans spilled on the table. And it was honestly one of my toxic traits. I had to process quite a few toxic traits, if I'm being very transparent. And one of the ways I've processed my personal, what I dub as toxic traits, was, these beans, is I've made the 1 3-day rule. That means I have 1 day to think about it, 3 days to address it. And if I do not address it in 3 days, then it's not a bean. It's not a problem. Now, I do add the caveat, if it's an extenuating circumstance, if this is a whole can of beans in and of itself, it's like the bean stalk that took Jack up or whatever, right? That's different. But for me, I found myself that where, like I said, I'd be busy, I'd tally it and then bring it up later, and that's not sustainable, and that's not really healthy for either person in the relationship. So I agree with a lot of your statements on the benefits, and I I think that knowing how to handle conflict resolution is another huge benefit for me as well. Knowing how to, that we're not going to yell and scream, right? That's something that I really appreciate, to know that my person isn't going to yell at me.
So one of the interesting things about decision making is often folks are trying to figure out who's right, and they're lobbying for their solution or their position, right? One of the nice things about this is I'm getting an echo suddenly and haven't up until this moment. That's weird. One of the interesting things about this is that, like in a sports game, in sports, you have this conflict because you don't know who's going to win. You don't know, and so there's some tension. You have this conflict, and you're not sure who's going to be the victor in this contest. In our relationship, I know that I'm going to make the decision, and that means that we can work together toward making a great decision instead of contesting in order to see whose idea comes out on top. And so one of the things that is valuable, and part of what you were saying about decision making, is it entirely changes such that we work together for an optimized solution rather than each of us trying to figure out who's right or which idea is
who wins,
that sort of thing.
We want the relationship to win.
So there's a huge shift in decision making and problem solving such that we both get to evaluate the options on the table, look for the best option rather than the one we personally generated and are fond of, and then I make the final decision and the contest is over. There was never a contest.
Worst football game ever.
Worst football game ever is the football game in which one of the teams is allowed to say,
I win.
Game's over, I won, right? Which is the way this relationship works. There's no way to have a contest because at the end of the day, I could say, argument's over, I won. So there's no argument. There's never any point.
I don't remember who said it, and I don't know if this is exactly how it was said, but it's not about being right, it's about doing right. And I think that for me, when it comes to authority and balanced relationships, it's not about me anymore, it's about us, right? And that makes it, that doesn't make, it helps encourage me to not be selfish, to not have those I don't know, I guess lazy thoughts is probably the easiest way to say it.
There's a whole lot of research that says that the person with power in the relationship is going to make decisions, is going to be selfish, and is going to impose sacrifice on the other person. The other person's going to get stuck doing things that they don't want to because of the more powerful person being selfish. It's called the selfish power hypothesis, right? Which has been super, super well supported in the research. I think that in authority transfer, you have two different models of leadership, essentially. One is the powerful tyrant who says, it is my way and I am here to reap the benefits. I will take advantage of the peons. I will do the,
drain them dry and then find a new one.
I am the leader and I am powerful and I get to have my way. So a very selfish, tyrannical model. And then the other model is a more pro-social, responsible, good king, whoever model, where you're enhancing the kingdom. You want everyone to have a chicken in the pot. You want everyone to flourish in your kingdom. You are out there working the fields with them or whatever, right? Maybe not. But so I think that part of what you're talking about is that there are two different models of leadership within our community, and the selfish power model is relatively common, where the needs of the dom, the master, the leader, and see, this is where I see leader as beneficial. Leader to me tends to push us toward a responsible model, a pro-social model, where those other terms allow a more selfish model. Not that it necessarily makes it happen, but I think it allows it,
Gives space.
gives space for it. So, sorry, one last soapbox to round us out.
No, I love it. And honestly, I was very thankful I got to attend a few of the Science of BDSM classes a couple weekends ago at Indiana Kink and Leather Weekend. And one of them was the Pro-Social Sadist. Very interesting class. But I don't want to get on a soapbox. But I do have a question from the audience. It says, doesn't it get exhausting micromanaging another person all day, every day? With a lot of these power exchange relationships, it looks like to me, as an outsider, like you fetishize bureaucracy.
That's fascinating. I guess the one of my quick response to that is, especially with 8 minutes left, is that many folks, I think, in the alternative relationship and sexuality community, the BDSM community, really do like the micromanaging, the control, the
Ordering about
all of that
lots of
stuff,
protocols.
lots of protocols. I think that is hot, and that is the place where you get to flex and show power and feel power as a follower, right? Is in those moments of micromanagement and I am ordering you about and you are, right? Our relationship and the style that Katie and I prefer has almost no micromanagement. I much prefer to say to her, go do this job, do it well, do it your own way. Don't do it the way I would do it, for fuck's sake. What a terrible choice that would be. Like, I don't want a mini me, so I'm not going to try to make her do a job the way I would do it. Go do the job really well, come back and tell me that it's done and how you did it. And if there's something I want adjusted, we'll adjust it for next time. Or I'll say, go back and make this little tweak on what you did. And so micromanagement is last thing on my list. There have been a handful of times in our relationship where I say, I want you to do this exactly.
Precisely.
And I want you to do it precisely this way. And I don't want any flexibility. I don't want you to think about this and add your own unique flair to it. Fucking do it this way. But otherwise, micromanagement, I much prefer the Jean-Luc Picard, go make it so, and then come back and tell me you've done it well.
I would like to comment on this question because I see a lot of it. Some people crave it, and for some it is posturing, and those micromanaged relationships, those very kingly, lordly kind of use up your peons relationships, exist with a lot of intense interactions and expectations. They usually burn out at about 2 years. Everybody's depleted and done. That is a real hard thing to maintain. 22 years later, we would not be maintaining that kind of thing. So it is fun, it is flexy, it is sexy, and it usually is not long lasting. The other part is every once in a while you have a very nurturing leader type, and they like to find a follower that needs that complete management, that building from the ground up, building the self-esteem, putting a person back together, giving them skills, giving them talents, and creating a real safe place for that person to be. We often refer to them, unfortunately, as doormats. And that, I think, is really unfortunate. And I think that the people that want that micromanagement, that oversight, that caretaking, that framework of safety, is a wonderful thing that this dynamic can allow for. And people thrive in both of those positions if you choose wisely.
If I'm wrong, but don't you actually have a writing that talks
Yes.
about being a doormat?
Yes.
My memory is always not perfect, but yeah, I thought I remembered, and it was a pretty good writing from my perspective. I might have to dig it up now because I don't really remember it. But
wow, it's very good recall.
So I think the last question to round out this conversation is, what are some resources for people interested in learning more about this style of relationship?
You could find a small amount about it in some of Dr. Bob's work. If you looked at, there would be segments here and there.
Paradigms of Power. That's Raven Caldera.
In Raven Caldera's book, Paradigms of Power, Dr. Bob wrote a chapter about executive model.
Raven Caldera's Building the Team.
Raven Caldera wrote a book called Building the Team that is about a cooperative model of authority transfer. That is a really good book where he talks about all the benefits of a cooperative model rather than kind of the more typical controlling, micromanaging model.
You got to talk about our book.
There's our book, Lead, Follow, Love, written with Dan and Don Williams.
Lead, Follow, Love.
Lead, Follow, Love. You can find that at leadfollowlove.com.
We just published that.
We just published it.
Just hit the press.
And it is super duper amazing. Everyone should have 4 copies.
330 pages of the hardest questions we could think of answering.
So it would give not a great necessarily overview of the executive model, but it does give our answers as executive model practitioners. So we don't talk about the model specifically and say, hey, here's how it works, but we do answer really tough questions with our executive model as the perspective from which we're coming when we answer those questions.
I think that's what we got. And books on leadership for you.
Yeah, all kinds of books on leadership, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. As far as the resources outside of the BDSM community, I mean, I can go on and on authors, not to mention other organizations such as like Toastmasters. I think I've recommended them a few times. Their motto is where leaders are made. Nonetheless, I think it's important that we don't limit ourselves to resources that are inside of the community. With that said, I think I caught most of them. I was trying to get all the links into the chat as fast as you guys were saying them as far as book recommendations. I do have Lead, Follow, Love inside of the show notes as well. I've heard about the book, and I imagine hopefully in the near future I'll read it.
Fantastic.
We should send him one.
If you do, then I have to ask that you sign it, because I'm a bibliophile and I have like, oh no, I mean, like, before I met Dr. Bob, I had Dr. Bob's books that I purchased, and then I met him, and then like I jokingly said that he should sign one for me, so then I bought all of his books again so he can sign them.
Oh my gosh.
Because like it was just like a monumental thing. Like I never thought I'd befriend Dr. Bob.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, so yeah, no, if you do send me a book, I would have to ask that it's signed.
Oh, we'd love to do that.
I'd appreciate it. I'll have to send you something in return. I'll think of something fun.
Not a taco.
Not a taco. Definitely not a taco. Okay, check. I don't think those mail well. I don't know.
Shipping tacos.
So, in closing, what kind of shameless plugs you got? Where can we find you? Where can we you already mentioned your book that you just published, Lead, Follow, Love. Do you have any other books? Do you have any classes coming up? You talked about teaching at conferences.
We don't have any other things booked right now.
We're still trying to put everything back together post-COVID here, and We haven't really got a routine for travel.
A lot of our favorite conferences didn't make it through the COVID years, and so trying to figure out which places would like to go and which ones are open to authority transfer kind of stuff, instead of, because we have very little BDSM content.
Well, there's free use.
But I mean,
mostly our stuff is sensuality, sexuality, and
relationships.
That's what we mostly have.
And personal growth. So we teach about like self-discipline in authority transfer. We talk about setting priorities and how your priorities should guide your authority transfer. Pretty dry stuff. Nobody jerks off in our class ever. So
well. But if somebody's listening and they're interested in having us come and speak, reach out to us. Absolutely.
Yeah, or if there's a conference you want to see us at, yeah, let us know, because we're open to travel and haven't really figured out where we want to be right now.
I think COVID shook up a lot of the world when it comes to conferences.
Yeah.
I think that off the top of my head, I think two that would probably be a good audience for you would potentially be MSC, and then Kinky College. I think that would probably be the best fit out
We've
of
taught
anything.
Kinky College a few times and MSC once, twice. Yeah, we love Kinky College. We have applied for that, so look for us showing up there in the future. But
yeah, they used to have us back pretty regular, but not since COVID. We haven't gone back.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great recommendations. Absolute fit. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll wrap this up. I can't say how much I appreciate your time. The thoughts. I quit counting pages of notes, but I got a couple of them.
You did an amazing job being a dynamic and engaged host without a picture to look at. Like, we've got your expression to work with, and so I'm smiling at you and I'm gesturing and you're just looking at a blank screen. So you did an extraordinary job making it feel like you were actually talking to us and not just like gazing off into the corner because you had nothing to look at. So I wanted to make sure I appreciated how much it felt like we were still connected, even though you've got nothing to look at but a blank screen. So thanks for being like really good at keeping it rolling and letting me have someone to talk to.
No.
Well, it was funny. Like, before we aired, it was like, well, they'll see me and hear us, right? It was challenging, honestly, because not seeing you talk and not seeing you use your hands or communicate physically, whereas I can see myself, it was challenging.
Right. Or see all my loving gazes at Katie, right? There's a lot of connection between us that you can't see, right? So anyway, I apologize to the audience, and I am grateful to you, because despite the technical difficulties, this was a joy from our side.
As is mine. So with that said, we'll say our goodbyes for now. We'll see you next time.